Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit, and always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hey everyone, it's the end of May, beginning of June, and I want to thank my sponsors for bringing these episodes. There's some great ones coming up in the next couple months. Health Code, thank you. It's Get Health, GETHLTH. They have some great shakes, high protein, good fats, and I made ice cream out of it. So I made the vanilla ice cream and added some strawberries, and really was a hit at my Memorial Day barbecue, and also made their maple protein bars. All this is on their website at gethealth.com. And also we have a discount code if you get their product. It's called MetHealth, M-E-T for metabolic health, H-E-A-L-T-H. And also Keto Mojo, thank you so much. I'm using them for monitoring glucose and ketone levels, and my patients love using it, getting their direct information very quickly, and they can share it with me. So it really makes life easy, and helps us stay accountable, and helps us double check on the continuous glucose monitors to make sure the sugars are correct. So Health Code and Keto Mojo, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate you. And thank you for bringing these episodes as we all get ready for summer. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Today I got a doc here in the heart, one of the hardest areas of medicine, in my opinion, emergency room medicine, Dr. Seneca Carrillo. Welcome. You went to U of A, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I didn't intend to stay in Arizona so long, but now I've been here like 30 plus years. Yeah.
So did you start out in Arizona, or how did you end up in Arizona?
So I'm Canadian by birth, but I've lived here, since high school. I just got dragged here by my parents looking for better job opportunities. And it just sort of stuck. It's a vortex in Arizona. Once you get in, it's really hard to leave because people are nice. Everything's affordable. It's so sunny. The temperature's, not ideal in the summer, but it's pretty ideal most of the rest of the year. But
well, in Prescott, it's ideal in the summer.
I know you're going to be going to a really nice part of Arizona.
So maybe we get you all to migrate up a little bit and we build this team up. What do you say?
With this climate change, I have a feeling we're going to be like California weather in a couple of years. We'll see.
Oh, global cooling up there in Phoenix. Everyone's rooting for that.
I think we're getting
That's for sure.
Opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. We'll see what happens. So tell people your story that don't know, what drew you to, what was the insanity that drew you to medicine, first of all? And then how did you migrate over to emergency room medicine?
So I initially thought I was going to be like a bench researcher in college. And after doing a couple of jobs, I realized that was awful. It was not a personality fit for me. So I sort of pivoted towards medicine. And then through med school, I kind of saw all the options of which areas to be able to practice. And I was not interested in dealing with chronic disease. I really was like, that's scary and doesn't look like it's going to be super fulfilling, because it feels like it's just prescription writing, which a lot of times it is. And so I ended up going into the emergency medicine, and that's been wonderful. It's been 23 years of the ER, but it takes its toll. It's got one of the highest burnouts of all the specialties and suicide rates. And
that's an amazing thing. And really, I've always I've always gravitated my personality. I love the ER people. Like, they're super intense, but then when they're out, they live their life. They go for hikes and they're doing things. Because I don't know what your schedule's like, but a lot of my friends they're on for 3 days, off for 4, on for a week, off for a week, that kind of thing. I was like, oh, you guys are lucky you get like vacation all the time. Us primary care guys, we just grind through most of the time,
Yeah.
and don't
Yeah.
get a break.
No, that's definitely the appeal of the ER, is that when you're on, you're on, and when you're off, you're absolutely off. And you do feel like you're making a difference, but it's like a Band-Aid difference. Like, it's a short-term difference. It's in the moment. And yeah, no, I wouldn't go quite as hard on my off days as my colleagues, but but it is known to attract the extremes of medicine. But I think there's two people that typically go into ER there. They're the people that would otherwise be surgeons, or the people that would otherwise be like FP, GPs, general practitioners. So I think I would have fallen in that GP category, except that I kind of felt like the chronic disease wasn't necessarily my bag. Fast forward 23 years, and now I'm looking at leaving doing ER and kind of focusing on chronic disease, because for the first time over these last 4 or 5 years, having kind of delved into the metabolic health space, I feel like there is actually a lot of stuff that we can do to change some of these chronic diseases. And it's just been eye-opening for me. Now I go to the ER and I see all these diseases that end up bringing people in secondarily, like diabetic foot infections, or, strokes, heart disease. All that stuff is still, it's like so preventable, but farther upstream. And I'm just seeing sort of the back end of it and getting to do a bit of patchwork. And even though that's gratifying, it feels like a little futile at the end, right? So I want to kind of be able to push myself upstream and make a difference doing something a little bit before some of these emergencies sort of arise.
Yeah, so, that's how I felt too, right? I felt that same way. You see it and go, gosh darn it, this person's coming to me. They have leg ulcers, they got renal failure, they got all these problems. Like, if someone would have like intervened a while ago, and that's what Jason Fung was seeing. A lot of us were seeing the same thing. It's like, gosh darn it. Now, once they get to us, a lot of times it's not too late necessarily, but it's like you got a lot of damage to reverse. It's going to take a long time and a lot of intervention, and you have to have that special patient who's saying, hey, I'm ready and I want to be healthier.
And they're motivated. Yeah. No, so the way I kind of found this was my husband, who's non-medical, needed to go to the doctor, and I dragged him to the doctor. And I went with him, and she gave him some homework because he had some high blood pressure issues. He had some, increasing waistline issues. And so she gave him Fung's book, The Obesity Code.
Wow.
As homework. And I was like, what? So I decided I would read it. He didn't even, I don't even think he opened the book.
So was that craziness?
It in a weekend.
Was that craziness to you when you saw it, or were you open-minded, or were you saying, let's see what this guy is saying? Like, what kind of crazy information this is?
I really liked the primary that I had taken him to, who's now my primary. And I was very open to it. I have always been kind of open to learning. And so the fact that she recommended it as homework, I was like, well, since I'm sort of pulling him along on this medical journey very reluctantly, I want to kind of participate too. And so reading the book was just, oh my gosh, I was so angry. And I know a lot of people feel like this.
Me too.
So mad.
Me too. Even before I read the book, I was watching Metabolic Mike was interviewing Jason Fung, and I was sitting there listening. I'm like, if this guy's right, I'm going to be so mad, because I've been eating Melba toast and the rice crackers, the rice cakes and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and green shakes, and I'm gaining weight. I'm like, if he's right about this insulin thing, I'm going to be really upset.
And the stuff I've been telling patients, I realized this isn't grounded in anything that I've been taught. I've just been kind of like spewing some stuff I heard in the mainstream media, or some like vagaries. I wasn't really paying any attention to sort of what I was telling patients to do as far as diet and exercise. And it made me embarrassed, it made me angry, it made me really mad at the medical system. And there was a period there, it was an evolution in my brain, but it started me down that path of looking into just metabolic health, insulin, and all the ways that those things affect all these chronic diseases that I end up seeing in the ER. And so it's also very closely connected. So he started me, just like for you, the Fung pathway into metabolic health. He started me. I started doing keto keto low carb, but I did strict keto for a month or two. I did carnivore for a month or two. Previous to all this, I had even tried veganism for a month or so. And that was just the hardest because it was so much food prep and it was so much thought. But I kind of got a sense of what I could tolerate and what made me feel better. And every time I did something that was sort of new, I would go down the rabbit hole and try and do all of the things the way that sort of the instructions sort of indicated, right? But I finally
you're a
come
doctor
to this.
And you follow orders,
Yeah,
right?
I'm good at following orders.
We're good at that. Yeah.
But I finally found a place where I'm like, okay, well, this makes sense in this context, and this makes sense in this context, and just kind of bring all those pieces together to sort of fit, what I was looking for, but also, how it would fit for other people, right? So initially, we all get a little dogmatic when we start this journey, I think, and thinking, no, this is the way. This is the panacea. And it's not the panacea. I think you also discovered this, and this is partly why you're doing more metabolic health and not just low carb. Like you're looking at all the varieties of things that are, going to be useful tools for patients.
Yeah.
Right?
Ultimately, you say, what's going to give you a better life? If you're nice and decent and kind and you love people and you help people, you're going to be happier. I just have been around that. And that's why I was kind of, when you were saying that about the ER, and I think you're totally right. There's different personalities. That surgeon mentality is like, I want to fix you, get out of here. I don't want long-term care with you. Like, let someone else pick up the pieces. And then there's the other that are highly compassionate. And that's like, man, it's like you would burn out. I would burn out because I remember just dealing with drunks that are fighting with me. I'm like, I'm trying to help you here, man. And, and it's hard because because I think you can lose your humanity when you're in a super intense, I was just talking to someone yesterday who's done social work her entire life. She goes, Doc, I was losing my humanity. I didn't care anymore. I've heard the sob stories. I've been through all this stuff. And he goes, because I was just getting killed by getting emotionally connected to everyone and like really, really trying to dive in. And some people didn't want to be helped. And I was, and in the ER, it's kind of the same thing. You see people, and a lot of the stuff is self-inflicted, and it's not because, obviously they don't want to end up in the ER, but they're not thinking of the long-term consequences of what they're doing, And mostly it's just dumb guys getting in trouble doing stuff we shouldn't be doing.
Right. And there's so many factors that play into why people end up, in the ER drunk or overdosed that, I'm comfortable sort of like backpedaling, but there are a lot of people in this space that are just kind of come down hard on why someone would make certain choices. And I kind of think like that upstream approach where there's a lot of different decisions that got that person to this point that they're in your ER. And for me, the one nugget is like, if I can get an extra 15, 20 minutes with any of those patients where I can sit and talk a little bit more, like it feels like I'm doing therapy in the ER. That's not why I went into the ER. But those are the most gratifying cases where we can talk about nutrition or lifestyle or stressors or other things that are sort of impacting someone's reasons for being there. Like those are the nuggets. Those are the little starfish that, you get to throw back in the ocean that hopefully will survive.
Yeah, I just had that happen this week. I had a doc come down from another state. They go, hey, look, I trust you and your judgment, and a person of faith, that was important to them. And an hour into our discussion, pornography comes up, that he's been struggling with pornography, and it's really put a hurt on his wife's self-esteem. She's gained a ton of weight, and he realized like that was the root of the problem. We never would have got there in 10 minutes going, okay, blood pressure a little high, this is a little high. Sometimes just talking about like what's really going on, like why are you drinking too much, or why is this that you're eating cookies every night, like were you not getting your satisfaction? So that is the medicine, like you said, it's the counseling part, but it's like getting to that. Like a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in the ER and in our office are just the symptom and not the underlying root cause of what is going on.
Right. Well, and I even noticed, starting this journey and cutting out carbohydrates, especially because it was COVID too, suddenly my alcohol intake uptook a bit, right? And then I'm like looking forward to that instead of the cookies and the ice cream or the chocolate. It was like, oh, I'm gonna have a beer today, even though that's definitely not keto or low carb. But that that idea of your addictions or your comfort sort of transitioning to different potential vices is totally real. And when you experience that like firsthand, it just makes you empathize and connect with your patient so much better. Whether you have an issue with pornography or whether you have an issue with alcohol, doesn't necessarily matter. As long as you can kind of see that there's a parallel with something else in your own life, that helps.
Yeah, and you figure out why is it that I need to drink every night? Why is it that I need cookies every night or whatever it is? And so when we talked about Tro and I talked about this on Low Carb MD, like episode number 13, and we just got attacked by the medical community. And then now you're saying, okay, look, the data is there. We have the data, and it's definitely we're seeing it. And I think once you have this mental clarity and you're on the right path, even if you're just starting the path, at least you know you're not going the wrong way forever. And so you kind of feel better about yourself. And then you say, well, I don't really need those things every night.
Right. Yeah.
Say, okay, I could put it off till the weekend, or maybe I won't do it at all. I feel better. And so when you start feeling better and getting the emotions right, it really makes a huge impact.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Yeah. So it was about a year ago or so, I decided, I like doing this so much. I was already sort of evangelizing a bit to friends and family. And actually my husband, so even though he didn't read the book, we took the intermittent fasting component of Jason Fung's, all of his recommendations, but that particular component he implemented. And we had I'd been following his fasting insulin. So we got his original fasting insulin. And then 3 months later, he'd lost like 30 pounds just by doing like 16 weeks. And his insulin went down by half. I mean, it was still bad, but it went down by half. And
yeah, you're going the right way. That's awesome. And that's what's, I mean, losing weight's a huge market, but I see all the time people's insulin comes down without significant weight loss, and their like sugars get better and their A1C drop. I just had a lady this week drop from 11.7 to 5.9, and you go, oh, okay, great. Are you kidding me? This is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So gratifying. So it just poof, like that, like when it's in your own life and you can kind of see it in your real time right in front of you. You can listen to lots of testimonials and hear all these wonderful success stories, but then you see it happening in real time. That's kind of as special. And so that just sort of propelled me further. And I started taking on some like test patients, people who might be willing to sort of try doing some different things and working with them individually. These were often friends and family. And ultimately I decided this is what I want to do. Even if it's not full-time, it's what I want to do, at least to kind of fulfill or provide that fulfillment that maybe I wasn't getting in the ER. And so last fall, I launched my own consultation service called Toolkit MD, because just as you kind of recently, decided that it's not just low carb, right? It is about finding the thing that's going to work for that individual patient and really honing in on like more of the lifestyle. And so there's lots of different tools in that toolkit, whether it's the intermittent fasting lever or the carb lever, the increasing the protein or the exercise or the stress or the sleep. All those are different levers to pull to help patients kind of get themselves back on track and empower them. And as much as I was super excited, like it's been a bit of a slow roll trying to get patients. I initially thought, oh gosh, I'm going to tell my colleagues in the ER that this is what I'm doing. And then I'm going to get inundated because I can't refer to myself. That's just part of the law. But having my colleagues maybe send patients, because people come into the ER all the time with just high blood sugar or just hypertension. And as much as that it's not necessarily an emergency, like people feel like it's an emergency and they need some help. So we can, reassure them in the moment that you're not going to die from this blood pressure reading or this blood sugar. They still need to figure out how to fix it. And, most of the time it's just the mantra of the eat less and move more and go see your PCP. And that's not super helpful. And so I was hoping my colleagues would be able to refer those patients to me. One, I just don't think people know what it is. I'm like a metabolic health practitioner, like solely that kind of entity is actually doing. But I also think patients just go to their PCP, but they're still not going to get that. And so I haven't gotten quite the traction in getting some patients as I had hoped, but I'm starting to get some patients trickling in now.
Yeah. And it's, really like with my practice here, other than podcasts and talking about stuff, and I've had a lot of people come from that giving little talks, and I would love to team up with you and Phoenix, and we got Ben Bakiki. We got some really great people down in that area. That we could give some talks at churches or community groups and get the awareness out there, because the reality was, and I think in the ER you saw this too, is that people during COVID, the ones who were dying were the metabolically sick, right? You're seeing
Totally.
the obese diabetics and people who are in poor shape. And the problem is, um, a lot of people got worse during that. Just like what you said, you and I did the same thing. Was saying, okay, I'm gonna have a drink. I can't work today because they're not letting me go in the office. I'll have a drink with my wife, and we'll be like summer break to calm our nerves. And so a lot of people kind of did that, and they stopped exercising because they said, well, I can't go to the gym, and it just turned into this whole snowball. So I routinely now see people who gained 40, 50, 60 pounds during the last couple of years just because
Yeah.
they were stressed out. I mean, like all these things we talk about in metabolic health, avoid stress, get your sleep. They weren't sleeping, they're stressed out. What they found comfort in is going back and having their Lucky Charms like they had when they were a kid and they didn't have problems. So they, all these processed foods went up like crazy. You can go to the store, but to get processed stuff, but you may not have been able to get meat or other healthier stuff, right? And
Right.
so it turned into, and they weren't exercising. They're stressed out all the time. They're watching the news all day. They're not going outside because they're afraid of dying. So they weren't getting sun exposure. All these things that we know are beneficial to health. Vitamin D levels, dropped,
All compounded. Yeah.
and so when you start seeing that, you go, oh my gosh. So we have to bring to the forefront the importance of metabolic health. And it all ties in. It's funny, as Western docs are the more I'm around, I go, what about the gut microbiome? And what about hormone levels and stress levels? And you start realizing, the importance of decreasing stress levels.
And just kind of minimizing what we're actually doing to the patients. This is the thing that I feel I kind of the most strongly about, is taking away the interventions and the medications and really kind of letting this crazy, wonderful mechanism that is the human physiology just do what it's designed to do and take away all the stuff that may be kind of throwing wrenches into the cogs of the machinery that's really well functioning. It's just we need to get out of our own way. But that sometimes going to the doctor or even going down some of this rabbit hole of supplements and really kind of optimizing can also throw wrenches into that process. There's I've got a patient I've just recently started seeing who wants to optimize his health, and he's doing carnivore and he's really like dialed in, but he is just trying to pull all the pieces together. He's getting prescriptions of this to help with this cardiovascular help and supplementing with this and the boron and the testosterone and trying to move all these moving pieces when I think the body just kind of, if you tweak it too much, it's gonna backfire. And sometimes just like letting it kind of do its thing without a whole lot of external intervention is good, but feeding it the right stuff and fueling it the right way and caring for it like the temple that it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and get out of the way sometimes. Just get out of the way and don't overcomplicate things and don't think about every little detail. Say, okay, go for a hike, go for a walk, think about life, contemplate on what matters, and relax a little bit because, and especially we'll see it a lot as people who are very health conscious sometimes can get so overwhelmed with their health. They're like, what's the ingredients in this water? Is there fluoride in this? Is this grass-fed beef? What if it's not? What about? And you worry so much, like, okay, just relax.
It's its own stressor. Yeah.
That's its own stressor because you can get so stressed and weigh yourself 10 times a day and your cortisol's through the roof. And, one of the big things, and it's just amazing to me, I just observe and I go, man, this is the craziest thing because we're all trying to, we've always talked about calories in, calories out and exercise. And obviously a lot of these things are helpful, but sometimes it's not. When you're drowning, it's like just breathe more air than water and you'll be fine. Well, it's not that easy when you're in the middle of the ocean trying to do that, right? So, because we have life stressors and all these things like we've been talking about. But I was in Guatemala for 10 days. Oh, and you have a background in Guatemala. I want to hear about your Guatemala experience too.
Yeah.
I was there for 11 days and I ate 3 meals a day. I had some mangoes because I'm in Guatemala and they're just picking them off the tree. The people who hosted us said, oh, we made this special dessert for you, doc, or whatever, So I didn't want to be rude. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna suck it up, and then I'm gonna get hardcore when I get back. And I lost 4 pounds when I was there. I'm like, how can this possibly be? And my buddy called me.
Parasite?
But yeah, I know. I did that before. I've already been through that route.
Same.
Yeah, I've done that before too. But buddy of mine said, he goes, Brian, guess what? Like we ride our bikes together. He goes, I didn't gain any weight at all. And he was eating way more than I was. He was really having a good time. He was like, I didn't gain any weight at all. I couldn't believe it. I go, yeah, me too. I lost a few pounds. So it's kind of, you start realizing when you're surrounded by people who are very positive, everyone like, the people there just love on you and just the love we got and the kindness and just not worrying about, like, I didn't listen to the news one time when I was there. I didn't care. I didn't look at Twitter. I was like helping people. So
Mhm.
sometimes when you realize, like, how much is it that we're looking at stuff that's just not good for us, or,
Right.
listen to the media all saying we're gonna die. And especially in the ER, I had super compassion. My one of my good friends, Mark Hernandez, who's been on all the trips with me down to Guatemala, uh, he was sleeping in a guest room in his house. He didn't want to expose his family when, we didn't know at the beginning of how deadly this was going to be or not be. And so in the ER, you're on the front lines. I can be a little bit, people say I'm sick and they don't want to come in. They go, what can we do? But, in the ER, you're seeing the sickest of the sick. And that was this other sad thing is I saw the primary care doctors would not see. There's patients here. I mean, doctors in California still haven't seen their patients since the pandemic started,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
remote or telephone. And they go, you're sick, go to the ER. So I'm
Yeah.
like, that's terrible. Like, take care of your patients. Like, how can
I
that
know.
possibly be?
I know. And that fear, that paranoia, even now, knowing what we know, that things have evolved and changed and aren't what they were at the beginning, there's still like this fear of seeing patients in real life or without a mask or, yeah. Yeah, no, it took its toll. Like we're seeing the fallout now. So this is the other thing that's sort of frustrating me about medicine is that in the ER, they have instituted, at least at our hospital, a physician peer support team. So those are other physicians that are kind of like pseudo trained to be support members for other physicians because physicians are known to not seek therapy or talk to anybody who may not also be a physician. And because our burnout rates are so high and suicide is so high, they want to train our physician peers, me, to be that person who can kind of say, hey, how are you doing? Like, how are things going? The fact that we need that at all, it's just awful. Like I'm down for providing that to my friends and my colleagues to be a person that someone can kind of sounding board with, or you can talk to about the stresses. But the fact that it exists is really sad. And when they asked me if I wanted to participate, I'm like, this is terrible. This is a system problem. Part of it is a system problem. And feels like a Band-Aid, right? But it doesn't mean that people don't still need someone to talk to. But boy, wouldn't it be nice to change the system. The
Yeah,
productivity number people that are sitting over your shoulder saying, see more people, work faster, work harder. You
yeah,
need to
that's
meet
what
the numbers.
they don't see that. That is the problem. Because they want us
Mhm.
to talk to each other and think we're just going to talk and it's better, but you're still working 18-hour days and you got to stress, family stress
Mhm.
at home. You got things you can't take a day. I was in a situation I was just looking at going, this is insane. I'm going to lose my compassion. I really felt like I was getting to that point. It's like, I don't have time to deal with all this stuff. If I got like 8 minutes or 10 minutes a patient, how are you going to talk about this stuff that matters? You go,
No.
here's a new pill, here's a new one. I'll see you in a month. Here you go. And then I'll see you in a month. Here you go. Here you go. Here's your blood pressure medicine. Not saying, hey, why is your blood pressure high? Are you stressed? What are you eating? What are you doing at night? You
Mhm.
know, for me, always even in my old practice, first thing I would ask people like, hey, how's life? How are you doing? Right? Like what's going on in life? Like, and
Right.
you could tell within seconds if someone's depressed, anxious, happy, if they're content. And it becomes very clear. And the other thing in doing work overseas is you'll see a constellation of symptoms, and I'll ask my translator, what do you think it is? This is stress related. Okay. Like my translator knows. Like it takes, like when you see it over and over and over, you go, oh, there's something going on at home because this lady's got
Yeah.
stomach problems, headaches, neck pain, all these things. This is all stress related. When you get to the bottom of it, that's what's going to end up being.
Well, so when I did my mission it was a medical mission through the hospital I was working at to Guatemala. That was the thing that was the hardest for me is
Where were
that,
you? Do you know where you were in Antigua, or were you in
oh my
probably in
gosh, this is like over like about a decade ago.
were
I
you like
don't
where there's
remember.
cobblestone streets and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we were housed in a convent, like with some monks.
Oh wow.
but but it was like a 9 day it was a 9 day trip, so it was not very
Wow.
long. But we set up this sort of clinic, and patient after patient would come in with stomach issues and stress related issues that was like, well, no wonder, like there's barely any food, there's hardly potable water, they're cooking over open fires inside their homes, they have no access to medical care. Of course, all those are huge stressors. And it felt to me, this was what was so hard was, boy, I'm here for a week giving out maybe a diabetic pill or a stomach pill and maybe treating a parasite. But what are they going to do next week or next month? And that was the thing that was so despairing. Like, I just felt like I'm so impressed that you can go back. Because when I left, I was just like, I can't do this again. It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking to feel like you're going down there and
But
really.
now you have a different tool. Like you have a different toolkit. Because when I go down now, I'm gonna go, look, guys, look, let's do a class and we'll talk about soda. Like these
Yes.
guys have sugars of 400. They're drinking soda all day because they say you need that for energy. No, you don't. It's killing you. So when you educate people and then you see them the next year and you go, wow. But we have, luckily where I'm at, we have a full-time doc and a dentist and stuff like that, so they can the hardest thing is getting meds. People get a diagnosis, but they just can't get meds. So we can take all the meds down and they have the meds for the year, and they're set. And so, yeah. And hopefully if we do our jobs right, we can start tapering people off of medications and get them. So I see people, I had people coming off insulin just being there a week, that we can help them and say, oh, you don't need insulin if you do this, this, and this. So
Stop
being able to
sugar.
provide the education is just like the same thing. If you pull teeth, but you don't teach them oral health, then you, it's just a waste of everyone's time.
Yeah,
So if you can teach
I
them, oh,
know.
here's toothpaste and here's toothbrush, here's how this works, because I mean, it is so. I remember I'll never forget this girl we were talking to, and I said, hey, do you have a toothbrush? Do you have toothbrushes at your house? She said, yeah, we have a toothbrush. And I said,
Toothbrush.
a toothbrush. And then I go, there's like 8 people in your family. Yeah, yeah, we just use the same one. I was like, oh, geez. Okay. Here's a bunch of toothbrushes and toothpaste. But you just don't realize, like, wow, they don't have access to
The
the most
simple,
simple
basic
things,
things. Yeah. Yeah.
like
I mean, the
reading
water
glasses or
was the
whatever.
thing that frustrated me the most. We had actually had a lecture about like how to set up like rainwater collection and how to treat water. And like, that's what, because otherwise you'd get these
Huge.
intestinal parasites and then they'd come back the next time around. And they were having
Yeah,
a lot of
totally.
GI issues.
But
Yeah.
that was one of my eye-opening things. So they ended up getting a parasite too. I don't know if you heard about all that I had, but I had it and it made a mold allergy really bad. And I started getting like issues.
Oh
And then I
man.
figured it out. I was like, oh, then I realized, oh, when I treat these kids for parasites in Guatemala, and I see them the next year, their asthma is better, their eczema is better, their allergies. One pill lasts a year for these kids. And you realize,
Mm.
man, if they go back in, because I was thinking the same thing. I go, if I give them this and they go drink out of the lake next week again, they're going to be getting it. And the doctors down there are like, no, doc, they're good for a year most of the time,
So at
maybe
least you
six
got to
months.
see that sort of like that transition over time. And I think
It
if I had
is.
maybe gone back and done it multiple years, I'd probably get that sense. But it was hard. It
Yeah,
was,
that's a hard thing because you can't help everyone. And I
yeah.
think that's the thing. And some people aren't it just in the ER in what we do, I had to come to terms with that too and say some people just they're not going to change. You could tell them, look, this is what you got to do. Here's the blueprint. Here's Jason Fung's book. Like your husband had a choice. He could have came home and said, I'm not giving up donuts and cake and soda. No way. And they go, okay, then what's going to come of him? He'll end up getting diabetes. And you know what's coming down the road, then he's going to end up seeing you for foot ulcers, right?
Right.
So once you say, okay, I don't want to be like that. And once people are empowered to know they can make a change, yeah, like, let's make a small change. And that's why it's so important to have people like you and me that says, hey, let's just do, okay, you don't have to run a marathon today. You can't do box jumps when you're 400 pounds, but can we get you doing light bands? Can we get you down to Ben's place? Can we get you in with a nutritionist who understands what we have to do? And the worst thing for patients is when they hear, like, if you say something, hey, let's cut back on the processed food, and then they go to their cardiologist and no, you got to eat, cereal every day. Cheerios is heart healthy. It's like, well, it's not for you. Your insulin is 58 and you got all these other problems. So when you start realizing there's impacts we can make, but the worst thing, and that's why I really believe, that's why I'm excited in Arizona to help build a community where you say, hey, go see this doctor. They know what they're talking about. This person's good too. For me
Mhm.
here in San Diego, it's really tough because all the time people say, hey, what cardiologist do I go to? Like none of them are going to be supportive of what you're doing, and then
Right.
Tro's doing studies and after studies showing improved cardiovascular health and A1C improvement. And, there's just a recent study with low carb versus DASH diet and they crushed them.
Hmm.
But the media is not going to talk about that because there's an agenda. And so that's the hard thing is, gosh, there's data that we're not just crazy people out here talking. And that's why I started low carb MD, because I go, well, the more people who are getting it, like you can't change the standard of care until people understand, like people listening. If
Yeah.
your doctor refuses to check an insulin, then seek out Dr. Seneca over here, right?
Right.
Look at other people who say, I'll do that. I'll help you out. Let's see where you're at.
Yeah.
Because again, your husband, they could have just looked at his A1C, then it looks fine. They go, you're fine, healthy, you're lucky. Don't worry.
His
Keep doing what
fasting
you're
blood
doing.
sugar was fine. Yeah,
Yeah,
no
your
problem.
fasting blood sugar looks great, but your insulin levels through the roof. And you go, oh, we got to fix that because that's a disaster coming. There's no way around that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So how do we fix the insulin? Watch this, like Ben Bickman, who I love, watch your stress, get enough sleep, don't smoke or drink to excess, exercise regularly, eat real food. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I could do some of those. Can I do 2 out of the 5? Okay, let's work on that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's almost been 5 years, I think, Brian, since you guys started the Low Carb MD podcast,
Yeah.
because I've been listening since the first episode, and watching that evolution over the last several years as well has been really informative. But it's kind of been paralleling my own sort of like discoveries. It's just great to sort of know that there is, you don't probably even realize how many people are impacted by that podcast and how many more people you've reached to be able to educate people like me, because it's taken a lot of energy for me to sort of be curious and investigate and go to the conferences and listen to the podcasts and look up articles and do PubMed searches. And that's not something I ever did in medicine before that, to be honest. Like, I would go to my standard medical conference just to get my CMEs, but this is a different level. This is like, I want to learn this. I need to know this. I don't want to tell people the wrong thing anymore. I want to actually be supporting it. And for so many years, it was just spitting out what I had been taught and not doing a lot of analysis, right?
We all
And
did that. We all did that. I
yeah,
was the same way. Eat 6 meals a day. If you skip breakfast, you're going to die. You're going to go into starvation mode and everything's going to stop. You won't be able to think, all these things we were told, and you go, where's the data? And that's why I loved when Jason came along and goes, okay, where's the data? Show me the study that shows that. There's
and
nothing
it
that shows
just
that.
makes so much sense when you can look at your physiology sort of med school classes and you're like listening to them. You're like, of course, yeah, this is exactly how this works. How are we not targeting different approaches other than pills? It's just, that's what's so frustrating. But
It
the amount
is.
of
It's like
work
once
that
you
this is
see it,
required.
right? It's once you see it, then you go, gosh, dang it, I can't stop seeing this now. When
Yeah.
I start having people coming off insulin, I mean, it is so amazing. I remember people would bring in pamphlets, go, look, this chiropractor said they can get me off insulin. I go, they're crazy. They're going to kill you. There's no way you come off it. Once you're on insulin, you're on insulin. It's because you
Yeah.
don't make enough insulin. Then we check their insulin level and it's normal. And you go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Like, how do we fix this problem? Well, we got to make you more sensitive to insulin, right? How do we do that? All these things that Ben's talking about, all these things that Jason's talking about. And you go, oh my gosh, so we could do without drugs.
Yeah.
But then the problem is they go see their endocrinologist and the endocrinologist says, oh, you know what? You don't have to do anything. I'll just give you more and more insulin. We'll get rid of that sugar. Don't worry. And they're looking at the little tiny sugar problem. They're not looking at the whole organism.
Right.
So they don't say, where's the sugar? Does it make it disappear? No, it's shoving it into your tissues, into your eyes, into your kidneys, where you're going to be on dialysis and you're going to go blind. That's
Mm-hmm.
not a very good option for you, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the amount of work it's taken to kind of accumulate all that information, the amount of reading and the conferences and the podcast, nobody can be expected to sort of like, just the general person, the lay population, the general patient is not going to be able to absorb all that information that we've kind of been absorbing for years now. And so to be able to just give them the fine-tuned details, there's just not it's hard for me to imagine how primary care physicians in general are going to be able to suddenly get updated with like a couple of nuggets. Like, it's
Yeah, and
really like a retrain.
that's the problem is, I think one of the greatest tools is continuous glucose monitors, right? It works fantastic. People can educate themselves and they can look and go, oh, when I have that, my sugars go crazy. When I have this, they're good. Okay, let's look at that. So people have said, well, every doctor should put people on the continuous glucose monitor. But the problem is, if you work out really hard, your sugar will go up high.
Mm-hmm.
And
What do
then
you do
they're going to
about
say,
that?
oh my gosh, your sugars go high when you work out. What? Don't exercise anymore? No,
Right.
of course not. That's physiologic. Don't worry about it. That's normal. That's good. That's a good sign that you can
Mm-hmm.
get to your sugar levels. But the problem is in Western medicine, they're going to say your sugars go high at 2 o'clock every day. We need to give you more insulin at 2 o'clock, right? Because they're
Yeah.
not looking at why is it happening, and like they're not looking at the root cause. So people like you say, hey, don't worry about it, that's okay, or hey, let's try tweaking this a little bit and let's change this and see. And then when they see it, they say, oh my gosh, look at my sugars are like this. Let's go back a month and look at your sugars. They were all over the dang place all the time, and we know these
Yeah.
fluxes are not good. Causes a
No.
stress on the body for sure.
So I wore a CGM for, there was a month I was doing ICU shifts, which was terrifying during COVID because they were down ICU docs and they asked the ER docs, can you do some
Jeez.
ICU shifts? So I'm like, I'll help, but I don't really know what I'm doing. So I put on a CGM because I was just doing some monitoring and I was curious. And I had done a shift that I was fasted and I had to put in a central line in an ICU patient. And, it's a different environment. It's not my ER. So I don't know where anything is and I don't know the staff or who to ask for help and get set up. And it's the first central line I've done in like months. And I was stressed and I had not eaten for like 12 hours. This was a fasted day for me. And my sugar was up at 185.
Yeah, totally.
185
Yes.
from just stress. Like that's just, and when you don't even know that that's happening to your body, like how many times a day is that happening to certain people whose stress levels are like chronically elevated? That's the beauty of that biofeedback from the CGM.
And that may be a lot of the reason why the ER docs don't work 7-day weeks, right? Because you start realizing you cannot be under chronic stress. It's a stressful job you have. So when you start looking, it's like, okay, like for me, my job's not stressful. I mean, I have to stay on schedule and I got to be on time and stuff, but doing direct primary care totally changed that because now I have an hour with the patient. Like if we can't get to the root of the problem in an hour, then both of us aren't doing our job somehow, right?
Right. Yeah.
So those kind of things of really building that connection. And you know what? Like one of my guys I just interviewed for the podcast, he went with me to Guatemala and he said he drives Uber and he goes, I'm like a counselor for these people. He goes, you will not believe how many people when you say, how's your day? How are you doing? And they just unload on you like you're their
Yeah.
best friend. And it's like they have no one to talk to. So
Right.
sometimes as physicians, we're that person in the ER, you're that person who has to be a listening ear. And then you go, okay, I got 5 people waiting. I can't be that much of a listener. That's a stress on us because we went into medicine to help people.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's sort of the key, is trying to keep your sanity, but also keep yourself open to those personal interactions because those are the things that are going to be most fulfilling. So even though there's that pressure, that 5 more patients, the productivity number person, it might mean you're going to piss off some people, make some people unhappy by going a little slower or taking a little longer with the patient. But I mean, I know in your setup, like there's patients just backing up. You can't like not, so you can't just you can't just sit with a patient for a half an hour. I mean, I know with DPC it's so much better, but in the ER I might get an extra 10 minutes, but that's still never enough. Like you could spend, now that I'm seeing some patients on my own with this Toolkit MD, I spend an hour and a half, sometimes up to 2 hours with patients on that first visit because I just want to know all the things, all their, who does the chores, who does the grocery
Yeah,
shopping,
all that stuff is so
yeah,
critical. Yeah. What's your support at home? What's
right,
your stress level? What's your biggest stressor? Like these
right.
kind of things that they're never asked. When I ask people the question, they look at me like, the question that I still laugh to myself and it makes me sad too, is almost, I mean, all my patients, I'll say, so what do you do for fun these days?
Mm-hmm.
And they look at you and they're like,
Yeah.
fun? Like,
Oh, I'll
okay,
ask about socializing. How's your social life? What are
yeah.
you doing? Like, oh, wow. Unless it's work.
Yeah, it's amazing. And doctors are the worst culprits, I think, for the most
Yeah.
part, because like, when you're dealing with people, all that. I used to drive somewhere in the middle of nowhere and you're like, who would live out here? There's this ranch in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, after practicing for like 15 years, I was like, yeah, I get it. You don't want to be by yourself and not deal with people for a little while because it's like it's so draining, as like after a shift, you got to be so drained, and you're like, oh, and then you get home and like, the kid's got an issue or something's going on. You're like, oh man, I don't have any more energy for this,
Yeah. But that is sort of like that socializing, that at least taking time for yourself. That's where the nourishment comes, where you actually recharge a little bit. Even though it's extra work, you do kind of have to like build it in. It's
And
so,
selfishly, when you're helping people, you get a satisfaction from that, right?
oh
That's our
yeah.
selfishness, is that people like now. It's amazing. When I was in a practice, probably making more money than I am now, but working 16 or 18-hour days. Every night I would come home, my wife would say, honey, how was your day? And every day I'd say, oh my gosh, today was brutal. I got yelled at by 3 people. They had to wait and I had to do that. And this person and the staff is arguing with each other because people under major stress is not a good combination. To
No,
have people
no.
together under major stress, complete, like ER is a stressful place. So when everyone's on their edge and they go one more thing and I'm going to lose it, then you ask one thing and they lose it, and then you got to deal with that and calm them down while you're trying to help the patient. It's a nightmare situation.
Mm-hmm.
So like now I come home and she'll go, "How was your day?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, I met the nicest guy and he was from here, and this lady was from here, and she's doing this, and this person they're off insulin. I took 5 people off meds." And she goes, "You love what you do." I mean, for a
Yeah.
while I wasn't loving it anymore in my old practice. I really wasn't loving it because I'm looking around all that, like you're saying, the doctors are burned out. If you're all burned out, how do you help each other? It's
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
So my
yeah,
initial, I dropped down from full-time to part-time about 2 years ago, and that helped massively with
yeah.
like mental health and stress. But not everybody can do that, right? Like you can't just tell people to work less, if you got
Yeah, you got bills to
loans
pay
to
and
pay
med school
back.
loans and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That when I was thinking about doing this physician peer support role, I was like, well, gosh, my advice is going to be, work less. That's probably not ideal for everybody, but it's not about giving advice. Actually, it's about just listening, right?
Mm.
So, but truthfully, I do think there's a balance that you have to find where you can't keep, like, something's got to give. You either can't work as much, or you can't work at that pace, or you're definitely gonna fry.
Yeah, and a lot of doctors are exiting the system because there's always been the argument of like doctors like us that say, you know what, let me go on my own and do this and see who I can help and stuff. And so other doctors are going to say, you know what, you're not helping as many people. It's like, well, if I'm spending 3 minutes with a patient, I'm not helping them anyways.
Right.
I'm of
Yeah.
no benefit. So what's happening is we become a cog in the wheel of the system. And the reality is, and this is what I've said all along in medicine is it's not about health insurance. It's not who has the best health insurance or what. If you have a doctor who's stressed, doesn't have time to do research, doesn't have time to figure out what's going on or spend time with you, then what good is that? Right.
Right.
It's kind
Yeah.
of like if and so the doctors are they're actually in a power position, but we're just not good at business. We're not good at understanding the system. We just come in and do our duty. And when
Hmm.
you realize they want me to see 50 patients now a day, like this is insane. You can't possibly do
Yeah.
like because like for you, this is what I was struggling with is if you have a patient you can really help and you spend that extra 10 minutes with them, now you're not now you have to go document and put in your charts and all that. Now you stay later trying to finish up the notes that you would have done in those 10 minutes, but you want to help that patient. So
Hmm.
that's when I was realizing like I just don't fit in the system if I'm so stressed because I'm going to stay 4 more hours at the end of the day to write the notes because I don't have a break between patients. So when they have a lot of doctors, if they have an 8-minute visit with a patient or a 12-minute visit, they're going to spend a lot of that documenting. And what they're doing now, because they're trying to be more efficient, I have patients that come to me and they'll say, "You're the first doctor who looked at me in the eyes." Because my doctor has his back turned, typing the
Right.
whole time I'm there,
Typing.
going
Hmm.
documenting everything because so they can get reimbursed. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
I know.
They don't even like have compassion to look at the patient anymore, right? Like I have a lady, she had a severe back injury. She was on the trip with us, and I was just checking in. She goes, "You know what, doctor? Not one doctor that I've seen 5 doctors, not one of them has touched my back." They just go, "Oh yeah, back pain. Here, take this pill and do this." And she goes, "Not one of them has touched my back or examined me or done a reflex on my knee. Nothing." Like, how can
Yeah.
this possibly be? I was like, well, yeah. She goes, "I saw how you guys were there in Guatemala. You did all this stuff with all these people. You touched every patient,
Right.
And it's like, they don't even look at me. How can and she's so frustrated with the system. And she says, "Is it because I'm Medicare? Why are they discriminating?" I go, "No, it's just the way it is.
This is the system.
It's a
Yeah.
system, right? Because they're telling you, look, Seneca, you got to see a ton more patients. You're not efficient enough." It's like,
Hmm.
how can I be more efficient? And so I spent years trying to get more efficient. And I go, am I trying to be more efficient or do I want to be more effective?
Right. Yeah.
You can't have both, I don't think.
And there's systems that work. Like, this is one thing that I've done in the last couple of years, having gone to part-time, is my husband and I are doing much more traveling, kind of taking our retirement in early chunks. And we'll go to some places in Southeast Asia or across Europe, and they're doing it in their systems. And they're providing even some basic level healthcare for everybody without breaking the bank. And they're able to sustain. I mean, it may not be perfect, but it's still feels like people have at least a little better option than we do, and we spend so much more money on the healthcare in the United States,
Yeah,
right?
it's frustrating. I'll tell you, one of the big, and as a matter of fact, I've spent time in El Salvador before and it got so dangerous. I go, forget it. This is crazy.
Yeah.
But they've
Yeah.
had a huge change in their country, right? The government has really done some good things and
Hmm.
cracked down on corruption and crime and all that. But during COVID, they were running ads saying, "Hey, look, you have to take care of yourself. You have to exercise, drink water, move more, watch your stress level, get enough sleep, don't, cut back on your," and they were doing all the stuff we're talking about as a government. No other government in the world was doing that.
Yeah.
Nobody was running ads like that, and if you
Yeah.
said stuff about it, then you got in trouble. But El Salvador knows better than we do.
Right.
Really? They understand
We think
preventive
as
medicine.
Americans we know better all
Yeah,
around.
and you go, wow, like they're ahead of the game. Sometimes we're arrogant and we realize other people get it better than we do. And being in Guatemala, I hear people saying, here's what we do for sugars when we don't have any money. We put some guava leaves in tea and it works. And I go back and look and there's data on this. Holy cow, these guys are not just making this up in the middle of this farm in the middle of nowhere.
It's
So it's
not
so
profitable.
awesome to see that
Yeah.
there's other approaches. And I think the most important thing is you say, get out of the way a little bit and let your body heal. The natural healing that the body can do is absolutely astounding. It is amazing if we sometimes get out of the way and say, okay, and the other thing you see in the ER is all these people on multiple medications. You're like, well, this one is because the side effect of that one, which you don't need if you do this, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a,
It's just
it's
sort
a,
of like wood puttying over the problem. Like you're not necessarily getting to the foundation, right?
yeah, you got termites all through your building and you're just repainting it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got to fix the termites. You
It
got
looks
to
a little
fix the
better.
termites. It'll look better, but it's still going to collapse on you, right?
Right.
So that's why it's so important to have docs like you. And so I hope we can team up in Arizona and
I hope
start
so too.
helping people and getting things squared away. So tell people how to find you.
Sure. So I've got a website. It's called Toolkit MD. So www.toolkitmd.com. And it's just me, right? So I don't have a front office staff. I don't have an MA or nurse. It's legitimately just me. And so I tend to meet patients wherever they're at. So I'll see patients who live in the east part of the Phoenix metropolitan area, and I'll find an office space in that area where I can meet with them. I'll see people on the west side, on the north, south. So it's relatively easy enough for me to kind of make it easy for them, and then they have direct access to me when they have questions. So they can text me, they can call, they can email, and this is like me responding to them. It's not a bot, it's not a nurse, it's not an MA, and it's within 24 hours I'll be able to get back to people. And that's something I can do remotely so that I can also keep my mental health, so I can still be able to take my retirement in chunks with my husband, but still be able to communicate with patients. And it's stuff that for me is like pleasurable. I love talking about nutrition and lifestyle. If someone comes in with a question like, can I put this on this salad? I'm like, oh yes. And I'll look up the macros for them and I'll let them know. Or what do you think about, just the questions. I love the questions. So, but I know for me, like getting a hold of a provider is like pulling teeth. So having direct access is it's kind of special and unique.
It
So,
is. People listening, please understand this is the critical part. It's not about what insurance you have. It's about access to the physician,
mhm.
because it is a major problem that's, I have patients call me all the time, say, look, I've called my doctor 8 times. I haven't had a return call.
Yes. Yeah.
So what do? End up in the ER, and the ERs are
Right.
over flooded. It is the least efficient. If you look at the ER billing, it's absolutely insane
Yeah. It's
for
so expensive.
for stuff your primary should have been able to take care of. So access is a huge issue. And that's why, I started Arizona Metabolic Health, and I'm not doing direct primary care yet, but really doing what you're doing, right? And saying, hey,
Right.
okay, like you can't get through and no one will order an insulin. We'll do that for you. You want to consult with us once, right? So you have people that can do a one-time consult with you, or they can have ongoing, metabolic health
Right.
consults, and
Yeah.
we can work with the doc who's their primary and help out. Or we can say, hey, let's start doing, I don't know, are you doing primary care stuff too, or is it mostly like
So
focusing on
no,
metabolic health?
yeah, I'm happy to. So this is what I want to do, is be able to coordinate with the patient's primary care or whoever their primary provider is, so that I can let them know, okay, we're doing this and we're going to reduce insulin here, we're going to change these meds, but doing it in conjunction with their primary, so they feel pulled into the loop. But I'm not recommending screening or mammos or a lot of the primary care stuff. This is really focused on just those metabolic markers.
Yeah, and I
But
think that's a huge thing, because that's where we, that's going to be the difference between us and a lot of the docs out there, because they're just not going to check an insulin. They're not
yeah,
going to look at metabolic markers. They're not going to be able to sit down and talk to you. So if that's what you're looking for, reach out. I mean, that's
yeah.
the thing. So
I did cold call like 5 bariatric surgery offices yesterday, and then 4 orthopedic offices, just to let them know, like, hey, if you have patients that you need to get their hemoglobin A1C better before surgery, or their sugars better controlled, or post-op, you need them to have some direct hands-on care. I mean, a lot of especially the bariatric services, they're kind of dialed in for that, but as an adjunct for them, to take some of that work off of them would be perfect. That's exactly what we'd like to do, is get those people where they need to be so that they can get better.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, because the burnout rate of trying to, just keep throwing more insulin at people, then when they start seeing their patients come off insulin, being happier and feeling better, they
Mhm.
become converted too. And then so then we have more doctors, we could spread the word that way, right? But there's such a huge need. There's not going to be ever an oversupply of doctors doing metabolic health. There's such a huge, we're looking at, data saying that 97% of us are metabolically sick. So we're only right 97% of the time, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
you start looking at that and going, gosh darn, do I want to be in the ER? Do I want to have all these extra meds? So I think, part of it's having that preventive outlook. Is like, no, I've always said, it's like, you don't want the mechanic who's the best at changing your engine. You want the one who prevents you from having to change your engine,
Right. Yeah,
right? So let's do
exactly.
oil change. It's not sexy and exciting like what you do in the ER, but it's like, you know what? You can see, because we know where it's going. So if we
Hmm.
can prevent it from happening, we get the satisfaction of knowing that we made your life better and longer, and you can go play with your grandkids. And that's a big thing, is the drug's never going to make you stronger. It's never
Right.
going to make you, more calm, maybe temporarily if you're on Xanax or something, but why is it that you're stressed all the time? So getting to the root cause. And so spending time with an expert who understands it. Well, it's like, if you're redoing your kitchen, you want the person who's redone the kitchen 1,000 times, not someone who's never tried, and go, oh, I'll try it on your house first. You know what I
Right.
mean? So when people have
Yeah.
experience like you, who've looked into it, you've done your due diligence, you've gone to conferences, and I think we met like in San Diego, I think, or somewhere. I
Mhm.
can't remember where we
Yeah.
crossed paths, but there's so many conferences. But when you say, hey, look, we're united, where we want to help patients, and all boats float, we all kind of help each other along the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we'll put all your info in the show notes so people can track you down. And really, if you're sitting on, like, make her busier. Make the doc, there's a doc who has the
Exactly. Yeah.
tools you
I mean, this
need,
is what I
right?
want to do. So I want to be busy. I do. This is sort
Yeah,
of the
we like
goal.
to be busy. We love to sit down with patients and be there. And so what
Mhm.
we're gonna hopefully do over time is build team in Arizona. There's great nutritionists here. There's great docs. There's great exercise physiology people. So we could build a team. Is like, okay, figure out
Right.
what you need. It's like, okay, let's consult this person. Let's work on this. Let's do, go for a walk as a group. And we build the community, and having community is one of the most important things we can do. So
Mhm.
doing joint Zoom meeting with our patients and all that kind of stuff. Whatever we can do to help people, like, bring their friends, and
And have
because
support.
everyone, like, all the time I see patients, I go, gosh darn, I wish my best friend would come here. I keep trying to talk. And one of my patients yesterday, who's doing great, she's like, my friend's coming next week to see you. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I can't wait. Because she's miserable all the time. Her back hurts, and she goes, I know you can help her. So it's kind of cool. Like, for us, we got to work on, word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
Word of
I
mouth,
think
and
that's
not
the
getting
key.
out there and talking to the surgeons and talking to to people who have a need. They just don't realize there's tools out there that can help them. So
Yeah, I agree.
what's
Yeah.
life's best medicine for you? I have to ask.
So for me, it's about staying curious, I think, to continue learning. Because that brings me joy. And the more I learn, the more the world opens up. And so whether that's learning about low carb or learning about metabolic health or seeing different places in the world and the way people live differently, those all are things that I think nourish and fulfill the sort of the whole that maybe medicine creates for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that, because curiosity is that's how medicine moves. That's how we help people. Because if you
Mhm.
say, well, this is the way we've always done it, we're not going to change it, and it's not working, you go, well, why don't we try something different? If that's not working, we clearly, it's not working, right? We
Right.
see our patients getting sicker, so we have to make a change. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts we can have, is curiosity, and also compassion and caring about patients, and saying, I want people to do better, and I want to engage, and I want to connect with you on a human level.
Mhm.
That's the things that medicine's lost over the last decade. I mean, it's really, I've seen it, where it's like, you're number 23, come up, here you go. We don't care about your kids. We're not going to ask any questions about how life is. And,
Yeah.
here's your drug, here's a drug, here's a drug. We'll see you next time.
Yep. You're the belly pain in room 11 or the heart attack in 3.
Yeah, it's not Tom, it's not
Nope.
Jackie, it's the heart attack, it's the stroke. You are defined by your illness, and
Yeah.
that's what we become. But I think a lot of us have seen it, and we've seen both sides. And I think going overseas and seeing the compassion, seeing, oh, I'm not like charting all the time. I can actually spend more time with the patient. Then
Yeah.
you go, I like this kind of, and that was the thing my wife said. She goes, I know you're working a lot, but when you go to Guatemala, I know you're working like 18-hour days, and like you don't want to, you're not going home until you see that last patient, and and I go, the difference is there's appreciation, and I'm not spending half my life charting. I could just be with the patient and do what we're doing.
Yeah.
So Doc, I love what you're doing. I'm excited for you. Anything we can do to help you out, if you ever get,
if you have friends, family that might sound like they need a little bit of a tune-up, whether it's for blood sugar, blood pressure, or obesity, fatty liver. I mean, that's the sort of nuts and bolts of what I want to work on, or even just, optimizing health. I'm down for that too. So www.toolkitmd.com. I'm info@toolkitmd.com. There's a phone number there. You'll get me directly. So yeah, reach out. That's great.
awesome stuff. And hey, everyone, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. And if you're told that you have a chronic progressive disease and there's nothing we can do, reach out. Reach out to someone who can help you and try to figure it out, because a lot of times it's not just chronic progressive disease. It's that we can intervene, and maybe we say, hey, let's tweak a couple variables. What works in your life? What doesn't work? And then we figure it out together, and we grow old together. That's kind of our deal. And some of us docs understand the longer you live, the more we make down the road, but that's not our motivation. But I want to keep my patients happy and alive, because you could vote with your wallet and say, hey, we're not doing what we need to do. I'm not getting better. Okay, go somewhere else, right? That's our job. But to treat you as a human and make you enjoy life, man, that there's nothing better for job satisfaction for us.
Completely. Yeah, 100%. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me. Great having you.
You take care.
Early in the morning.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify, or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.